quickly mention that we are going to be recording this webinar, and also that we will make the recording available to everyone who's attended afterwards. Also, can I just draw your attention to the questions window that you should have on the right-hand side of your screen. Please do feel free to ask any questions as we go, and we will have some time for answering those questions at the end. So let me introduce our panelists for this afternoon. So my name's Ian Woodgate. I'm the Managing Director of UK SharePoint Specialist Point Beyond Limited, and I'm joined by my colleague, one of our managing consultants, Simon Wright.
Hi there. Hi everybody. Thanks for coming on.
So our agenda today is pretty full. We've got a lot of stuff to cram into the hour. We're going to start off by looking at different editions of SharePoint 2013 and some of the ways in which it can be run. We've then picked 6 kind of key areas to look at, going from business intelligence through to mobile search, sharing, enterprise content management and solutions, and then we'll round off by talking a little bit, very briefly, about technical stuff and next steps with SharePoint 2013. So we'll crack straight on. So we do have a lot of stuff to cover off this afternoon, and start talking about SharePoint editions. So those of you who are familiar with 2010 will recall that you have 3 basic versions. There's Foundation, there's Standard, and there's Enterprise. And that still plays true for SharePoint 2013. What we do have as well is we've got the online versions, and there's obviously a big push from Microsoft with SharePoint Online being part of Office 365. One of the changes between SharePoint Online between 2010 and 2013 is actually that the online offerings have become a lot more similar and a lot more closely aligned to the capabilities to the on-premise. And certainly if you look at these tables comparing the different editions, you can see by looking at the right-hand 2 columns in each section, both for on-premise and online, that they're very, very similar. There's a few differences. However, you do need to remember that if you actually want to customize your SharePoint deployment, or you want to integrate it with other line of business applications that perhaps are running on-premise, then that may be a lot easier to do with an on-premise SharePoint than with a with SharePoint running in SharePoint Online.
Is it worth saying just now, actually, in all of the demos you're going to see this afternoon are based in Office 365?
That's a good point, actually, Simon, yes.
Any functionality you see this afternoon, you'll be able to get in Office 365, assuming that you're on the right plan.
Correct. So one of the bigger changes, though, with going from SharePoint 2010 to 2013 is licensing. And somewhat unusually for Microsoft, they've actually made the licensing simpler going from 2010 to 2013. There used to be an additional license for fast search, so if you wanted the high-end search platform, the fast search engine in 2010, you had to go out and buy separate licenses for that. That's now gone, and I'll talk a little bit more about search functionality later on in the session. The other big change is that you no longer require SharePoint for Internet Sites licenses to allow people who are external to your organization to access SharePoint. So with 2010, if you had external users, say accessing an extranet, you either had to go and buy a client access license for every one of those external users, or you had to buy SharePoint for Internet Sites license, which was quite an expensive license. Similarly, if you had an internet site running on SharePoint 2010, you had to license each of those SharePoint servers with a for Internet Sites license as well. That's all gone with 2013. And all you require now for your external users is to have the SharePoint server license. So quite a significant licensing change there if you're looking to use SharePoint beyond your organizational boundaries.
I think that's a really key one for lots of businesses, and I know there's lots of third-party tools that allow you to publish out various bits of content that sort of link with SharePoint. But in the past you used to have a for Internet license, and now you don't. I think it's just a huge...
It's a huge change, and it makes SharePoint much more compelling as a proposition for an extranet or even for an intranet site. So the next thing I want to touch on quickly is the kind of Microsoft positioning of the 2 products. So those of you who've looked at SharePoint 2010 in the past will probably be familiar with the famous, or should I say the infamous wheel on the left, where SharePoint was really positioned very much in terms of its features and less on its benefits. SharePoint 2013, Microsoft have tried to play much more on the benefits and what you can do with SharePoint rather on the features of it. And we have this kind of more simple share, organize, discover, manage and build kind of marketing message coming from Microsoft. And the colours changed as well.
Yeah, slightly lighter blue, big change there.
Okay, want to go on to the first of our 6 areas now, and we're going to talk about business intelligence. So if you, those of you who are familiar with business intelligence in SharePoint 2010, will be familiar with this kind of business intelligence center that you have in SharePoint 2010. The BI really has taken a considerable leap forwards in SharePoint 2013, and it's very easy now to create really engaging dashboards such as the one you're seeing now, and I know Simon's going to be demoing business intelligence capabilities in a minute.
Yeah.
So let's just go on now and compare the 2 editions and the 2 versions in a little bit more detail. So we can see that most of the features that we had in 2010 have been improved as we move to 2013. So things like Excel services, where we're able to render and interact with an Excel spreadsheet through our browser, has been improved. Same for Visio services, which allows us to create dynamic data-driven diagrams and drawings, again, which can be viewed within our browser. We've got Performance Point for building dashboards. We've got some functionality around Power Pivot that's been improved. So Power Pivot is a powerful way to slice and dice cubes of data and to allow people to drill down and analyze their data. We've got some fairly new functionality around something called Power View, which I know Simon's going to demonstrate in a minute. Power View gives you the ability to use tools like Excel or SQL Server reporting services to really quickly assemble really powerful interactive dashboards, again, which can be displayed through SharePoint. And lastly, worth mentioning that the chart web part as actually something that's gone now with SharePoint 2013. It was a very simple web part that allowed you to draw charts. That is no longer with SharePoint 2013.
Oh, I'm sad about that.
No one ever used it apart from Simon, I think. So.
Yeah, I like that part.
So.
When a customer asks you, oh, what about the BI, and you've got 5 minutes left at the end of the day, the chart web part would always get you out of jail free, but no longer.
So I'm going to hand over to Simon now for the first of our demos, which is a quick BI demo.
Okay, thanks Ian. Let's just drag across our BI site. So we've got a standard SharePoint site now with some various BIs across the top. I'm going to start with the Executive Reports tab just here. That's just loading up now. Shouldn't have hit F5. There we go. Okay, so this is the first example is using Power View, which Ian was mentioning a little while ago. Something that you could create in Excel, perhaps give out to a business user that knows Excel and knows their data, reporting on a cube, perhaps of data that's stored in SQL. It then gets rendered in the browser, and this is an example of the results. So 3 little squares here you'll recognize. We've got a pie chart, the obligatory pie chart, the bar chart, and a line graph, but we've also got a map-based representation of our data, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. First of all, I just want to drill down and find out about revenue for computers as a scenario. So I'm going to hover over the little green segment here in the pie chart, and I can see that the revenue there is, oh God, what is that, 89 million or billion, I don't know. But let's click on that. And you can see as I click on it, when everyone's screen catches up, what will happen is that it filters all the other charts, which is a really nice thing. It allows me to sort of hover over on this bar chart here and see in a bit more detail which company and which brand and category, how the sales are broken down, which is really nice. If I click here on the Contoso one, a name you'll all recognise if you've ever seen a Microsoft demo, you'll see that it kind of reverse filters, and we can actually see the proportion in the pie chart of sales for Contoso for computers. So really nice, very easy, very quick to get to the root of what's going on. And speaking of root, let's have a look at these sales dips we had in August, September, October. You can filter on the fly, and I want to just filter out those. Let's just filter out 4 months around it and see what's going on. You can see, you can just click on the filters and start to drill into what's going on, and you'll see that it's filtering the sales amounts on the top here and the gross margin. So again, another way of getting to find out what's going on within your data. Let me just clear that filter. The last bit, and by far the coolest, I think, is the map. This is a map showing customer service satisfaction by region. You can see Australia, they're very happy, don't blame them. America not so. If I click on here, it will actually filter out my charts, again, as we saw before, so we can see the proportion of sales. If I double click, part of this using Bing, it's going to zoom in and show me the United States, and I can start to see my customer service stuff by area and region. And we can see, for example, that over on the East Coast, Virginia are very happy. I click on there, but very few sales. California seem very unhappy. Click on there, an awful lot of sales. So it's something for people to look into there if this data meant anything to you. But I think really powerful visualization there using Power View. Very quickly, let's click over to the customer satisfaction dashboard. This is something you'll recognize from 2010. So this is using Excel services to render a sheet in the browser. One thing that's new though, and this is new for 13, if I right click on a region, say Australia, and do quick explore, oh, let me reload that. Poor old screen's been sat here while we've been waiting to join. Quick explore, we can start to drill down into the different bits of information that make up this chart. So we can start to filter all of this information, so really powerful.
That's really nice. And I think worth saying as well that both of these demos that you've shown here, Simon, were both done just using Excel.
Yep. And this one we're looking at now, we're working on an iPad, and we'll see a bit of that later. Last but not by no means least, and again you'll recognise this from 2010, Visio services. I only want to show you that because we're going to look at this a little bit when we look at mobile next. I just want to show you this is what it looks like here in the browser, and I'll show you that on the iPad I'm going to be using later. It's pretty much the same. So that's a whistle-stop tour of BI. Let me hand you back to Ian. Let's get on with our next section. Lots to cover.
Which is mobile.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Simon. So let's talk about mobile. So mobile in SharePoint 2010, if anyone tried it, it kind of looked like this, and it's pretty hard to imagine how Microsoft could have deprecated any features moving from this kind of starting point.
That's true.
SharePoint 2010 was clearly behind the mobile curve. Microsoft had put a huge amount of effort into correcting that, and if we look at the capability of mobile in SharePoint 2013, we see it's in another league compared to 2010. And I would say actually, of all the conversations and people that I'm talking to, probably this is the most asked for requirement is around mobile access to SharePoint. So huge area, one that Microsoft invested very seriously and very heavily in. So if we look at the capabilities and the differences between 10 and 13, we can see that you could view a basic site in 2010. It wasn't really very usable at all. That's really been corrected now with SharePoint 2013. We've got things like the Office web applications that allow you to view and edit Office documents without having, say, Office installed. Those will work on things like an iPad now. We've got support for device channels, so we can actually send different content that's formatted in a different way to different devices, so that if you're on a small kind of handheld device, then you might see one thing, and if you're on a larger tablet, then you might see something different. We've got some nice additions like geolocation field, which you can use in mobile app development. Some of the BI reports, such as the performance point in the Excel services that Simon's shown us, will work on things like iPads. There have been improvements made to things like browsing speed. There are apps available for iPhone and I think for Android as well for doing things like Newsfeed, and also SkyDrive Pro, which gives you an offline cache of your documents that you're working on. One thing that won't work though, that is worth highlighting, is the rather sexy Power View dashboards that Simon showed us just now. They won't actually work on something like an iPad because they do use Silverlight behind the scenes. So I'm going to hand over again to Simon now, who's going to give another quick tour of mobile capability.
Thanks very much, Ian. And while I'm getting this set up, I think on the Power View and Silverlight, I think all that really is a lesson in decide what your audience is going to be and design your reports accordingly. Oh yeah, I'm presenting on the wrong laptop. Here we go. So I've got a little bit of software called Air Server. I don't know if anyone of you have ever used it. It's fantastic to share my iPad with this presentation. So first of all, Ian mentioned apps, and you'll see on the home page here I've got an app called Newsfeed, which is an app free from the Apple iStore, and this is hooking into the live Newsfeed. So not a particularly sexy name, mod administrator, but you know, this is me logged in, and you can see that it shows you information like who I'm following, people, and documents. You can see I'm following Anne and Chirag. There's Anne. You can see her information. Actually swipe through and see her activities. I can see who she's following. I can see who's following her.
Slow it down a little bit, that machine.
Sure. Probably flying through that a bit too quick. But lots of information there, all on an app, so you can keep up to date. Now, I think as we're looking at the social elements, which we'll come on to in a minute, and the sharing, this becomes really powerful because everything's very integrated with SharePoint 13. Clicking through and linking to things, much easier drilling down and actually getting to the root of perhaps a discussion, much better than in 2010, and I guess this app is a testament to that, and we'll see more of that in the sharing section in a minute. Okay, so let's have a little look at what SharePoint looks like in the browser. So this is a really bog standard site. We're going to come back to this a little bit in a minute for the web content management, but this is a fairly standard SharePoint Teams site. It's got a bit of content in there. And you can see it renders and it browses exactly as it should do in the browser on a machine, on your PC. So an awful lot of work's gone in here as well. Another nice thing, and here's the scenario, a bit around BI and mobile. Perhaps you have the customer service director out in the field on their iPad, and you remember this from before, our order fulfillment status. And we can see our Visio diagram in the browser on my iPad, rendering as it should do. And I can see if there's a problem with shipping. You can see that by the kind of orange symbol there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the order fulfillment status. Let's go into that and find out a bit more information. So this is using Visio Web Access on my iPad, working as it does in the browser. If I highlight shipping, you'll see it's highlighted in blue there. And now if I click on Shape Info, this diagram's linked to data in SQL. I can see that my average shipping delivery time is 31 days. So I'm not particularly happy about that. I want to find out what's going on. Here's another new feature for SharePoint 13, comments on Visio diagrams. So if I click on comments on the top page, what you should see is that on the right-hand side, we get a comments box that pops up. And we can see that people are already discussing this, which is good because I'm not happy about it. And on the iPad here, I can click in reply. Up comes my my keyboard, and I can start to put in a comment like, please call me about this ASAP. Someone is in trouble. And that will add my comment. So you can see, working in the browser on an iPad or a Windows phone, pretty much like in the browser. There are some limitations, as we mentioned earlier, around things like Silverlight, but much improved and actually really workable. And on the train down to present this today, I was checking all these sites on my iPad, tethered to my iPhone, all working a treat, which was a really nice thing. Ian, I think that's mobile.
Great stuff, thank you very much, Simon. So the next area that we're going to talk about is search. Out of the way.
Yeah, let's close that down.
So this was the search experience in SharePoint 2010, and I'm assuming here this is not fast search, this was the standard SharePoint search. So it wasn't a bad search engine, it worked reasonably well. We had the refiners down the right-hand, or down the left-hand side of the screen. But search has been another huge investment area for Microsoft, and if we look at the search in SharePoint 2013, we can really see it's in another league to the SharePoint 2010 search. Now, a lot of people say that the SharePoint 2013 search is the fast search, and that's not actually quite correct. What Microsoft has done is they've taken aspects of the fast search, they've taken aspects of the SharePoint 2010 search, and they've actually got a new search engine which is a kind of combination of both of those search engines to build this new kind of search capability. So let's go and look at our comparison table between the two versions. And what we can see is, again, a lot of improvements. So we've got some nice functionality like visual display of contents as you hover. So if you've got, say, a Word document or PowerPoint presentation, you can hover over that and see a preview of it and check that it's the correct document before you actually open it. We're able to see things like counts, how many times a document has been viewed. We've got personalized results pages, so Microsoft will take account of what you've searched on previously when displaying your search results. There's the kind of type ahead, so kind of queries get suggested as you start typing in your search text, similar to what you're used to if you use something like Google or Bing. It will prioritize results that you've clicked on previously, so if you regularly look for certain things, it will kind of learn about that and make sure that those results are shown up at the top. You can also do some nice things like follow documents rather than having to set up alerts. You can follow people straight from your search results as well. And the last thing worth mentioning here as well is the continuous crawl. So There's a new way of crawling in SharePoint 2013. I won't go into the technical detail of it now. Called continuous crawl. So rather than scheduling regular full or incremental crawls, you can have continuous crawl running, and it keeps your content more up to, your search index is more up to date. So when new content is added to SharePoint, it's being found much more quickly. So huge growth area. Let's hand back to Simon for a quick demo of search.
Thanks, Ian. It's a shame about search, really, because it's so huge. I mean, those of you that have got really in-depth with 10 will know that it was big, and fast even bigger, and 13 is just bigger still. I mean, we could do an entire section on search, to be honest.
Do an entire webinar on probably any of these 6 areas.
Yeah, no, you're right. Okay, so here we have a search center, very clean, as you'd expect. Doesn't look too dissimilar from 10. I'm going to search for something with the word presentation. Particularly broad term. We'll see why in a second. I hit enter and we get to the search results. Just wait for everyone else to catch up. So, as Ian was saying, much richer. Although, you know, the core of it is a list of search results, and we have the refiners down the left. We've got some new stuff down the right. So let's say, I mean, this is going to be particularly useful, well, for everybody, but I know Sonia, who's on our marketing manager, is going to find this particularly useful, trying to dig out the right PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just going to hover over FY 2011 share standing, and we see on the right hand side straight away that the PowerPoint web apps has opened that up, and we can actually start to click through and look at the presentation, which I think is really useful, because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I've been trying to look for a presentation, one's called really important presentation 1, 2, 3, it's really hard to know which is the right one. Other things that are on this contextual thing as you hover over that I find really useful, one is View Library. Now, in 2010, the only way of getting to the library where a document was stored was to copy the hyperlink at the bottom, paste it into another window, take the file extension off the end. I mean, it was just a bit of a headache. Strange now, they've become second nature, but finally we have the View Library option, which means we can, if we find a really useful document, perhaps there's other documents there, perhaps on a project site, I can skip straight over to the site, to the library itself, and see all of the related content, which is another really
simple thing, but really very useful.
So obvious, but so lacking before. Search signage down the left, so just to show there's no smoke and mirrors, let's just highlight on Word on the search refiners, and what we'll see is we get some Word results coming up, and again, there we go. If I hover over the item itself, we see a Word document rendered in Office Web Apps, and I can scroll through that document. Also here I can follow. Again, as we see that we look at the social and the sharing bit in a minute, you'll start to see that this is actually usable, whereas for 10 everything was a little disjointed around this kind of alert me. We can send a copy, we can edit it, we can also see when it's last changed and all that kind of stuff. As with lots of the Office 13, we've got sliders wherever there's date information, which is really nice. So I can start to filter out results based on sliders for the modified date, and for those of you who've used Excel 13 and Power Pivot, you'll know that those sliders are really useful. People, similarly, and again I think this is another thing to say, it's much more joined up, SharePoint 13. For people, if I hover over, I see contextual information again. I see a little bit of their profile page. I can follow them directly from there. Let's do that. I haven't followed as is. And I also see their recently authored documents. Another really useful way of finding content. Last, and I suppose this is kind of touching on the web content management, but video. So I've got a search scope here for video. As with all of the other documents there, I can hover over the video, and once my browser's caught up, you should be able to show that in playing in the browser. So you can start to scrub through that video and check that that's the one that you're looking for. Maybe a little bit much for the webinar to cope with.
Just pause it and people can see it.
Fantastic. So really holistic. And when we join it up with sharing, I think we'll see that it's actually really powerful. I mean, search will be crawling through all of our social comments, our statuses, our activities, our hashtags we'll see in a minute. So really, Search Center really becomes the center.
And search really is a core service to 2013 as well. So even things like the web analytics are actually being driven off of the search now.
Yep. Great stuff. I think that's me for search. Hand you back to Ian.
Thank you very much, Simon. So the next area that we're going to talk about is sharing. And this obviously is a huge area. So what are we talking about here? We're talking obviously about things like collaboration workspaces, which everyone will be familiar with from SharePoint 2010. So the ability to upload and share documents in libraries and to have lists like calendars and announcements and discussions and that kind of thing. And also in SharePoint 2010 we had a kind of very basic social experience, which in my experience wasn't all that widely used. We had things like My Sites and user profiles as well. This kind of capability has taken a huge leap forwards in SharePoint 2013. If we look at the social kind of capability, it's much more in tune with what people who perhaps use more sophisticated social tools will be used to. And if we look at our comparison table, you can see that there have been lots of improvements. I think one of the things that's worth highlighting, though, just generally, and we've seen it already, is just how much cleaner and faster and easier to use the user interfaces in SharePoint 2013. It's much more intuitive. Things are kind of where you expect them to be, and it just seems more clean and easier to use. Looking down the table in a little bit more detail now, we've got things like discussion boards, which are much more like the kind of discussion boards you'd expect to find on a decent kind of platform, say a proper discussion board website or something like that, rather than the rather simple and clunky discussion boards that we had in SharePoint 2010. We've got things now like hashtags, so we can use hashtags to easily find and tag things, find things that people are talking about across our organisation. We also do mentions of people in response to postings that they've made and comments that they've made, and these will show up in your feed on your My Site. So, as Simon's already mentioned, any kind of status updates or activities that people are undertaking, that now is going to be searchable, and you can set retention periods as well in terms of how long that's going to be available. You can follow hashtags and stay on top of topics that are of interest to yourself. And one of the really nice things I like is that, I think Simon will show it in a minute, is the ability to share content very much more easily than you could in SharePoint 2010. One of the nice things with SharePoint Online actually is that you can actually very easily share content with external users, as well as sharing content just with people in your organisation. That is permissions controlled though, so you have the ability to control who you would or wouldn't want to be able to do that. A few things have got deprecated as we've moved from 10 to 2013. I'll just highlight a few of those now that are worth mentioning. The first one is the document workspace site template. It's been in the last few versions of SharePoint, I think, not very widely used, and that has now gone. Also the meeting workspace site templates, which did have some quite nice functionality in it, including the ability to do recurring meetings, and you'd show them in the calendar, and each recurring meeting instance would have a click through to a meeting workspace. That has now gone.
I think quite a lot of customers have got meeting functionality built around that, and it's worth saying that it is still there in the background, so that when you upgrade, your sites are backward compatible, but you're not going to be able to create new sites without hacking it a bit.
Yeah.
So it's probably worth moving on, basically, I think.
Absolutely. Web Analytics, we mentioned the old Web Analytics has gone as a separate service. That's now part of Search, but it's more comprehensive in terms of what it delivers. And the last thing worth mentioning that's now gone is organizational profiles that you had similar to my user profiles. I've never really used organization profiles or come across anyone that's used that. Have you, Simon?
I think some people have built applications around them.
Right.
And that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah.
Basically.
So let's hand back to Simon again, and he shall give us a quick demo of some of the new features to do with sharing in 2013.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much, Ian. Web content management, and again, it's a huge subject. So what
sharing.
Are we sharing? Oh, sharing. Sorry. Oh,
Simon's getting ahead of himself here.
So excited about web content management. All right. If you insist, sharing. Okay. First example of sharing, you've seen this already. Customer satisfaction dashboard. On the right-hand side, I didn't mention this earlier, but this is a site newsfeed. So it's a newsfeed relating to a specific site. Really powerful for things like project sites, so project discussions and those kind of things, site-specific discussions and news feeds, because all of it is searchable. And SharePoint Search is going to do some clever interpolation to base it on, which site it's on and the hashtags and all those kind of things. Speaking of hashtags, we can see in the site newsfeed that we have some hashtags. Chirag has just launched the customer services dashboard, If I click on that hashtag, it's going to take me away and show me all of the content relating to that hashtag, relevant conversations that have used that hashtag. And as we expect, and as Ian was saying, search is very pivotal to this, and we can see the contextual conversation. We can actually go to the conversation itself and see the actual conversation and where it was. So hashtags very powerful. Sharing. So every site will have a share button. Don't underestimate it. It was always very difficult to find the content that you were looking for. Interesting. What have I done there?
Try a different page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So it's always been very hard, I think it's fair to say, with early releases of SharePoint to find out, for example, who has access to this site. So clicking on the share button tells me that it's shared with 3 and 21 others, so 24 more people. I can click into there and it will show me who it's shared with. And I can add people direct to that site from here as well. Other sorts of sharing, I think if we go to the, let's go to another site. I want to show you some of the discussion boards that Ian was talking about earlier. I think really powerful. So here we're on a product ideas and a brainstorm site, and down the left-hand side you can see a discussion board. This is a really nice template as well, actually, because there's all sorts of things around contributors and badges and that kind of stuff that you'd expect on a proper discussion board.
Discussion boards are really good in 2013, really nice actually.
I mean, any of you that have had end users asking you for discussion boards, you will have been out and looked at third-party tools to try and augment them. Now, perhaps with 13, not so necessary. I'll leave it to you to decide. So let's just show you hashtags and mentions. So I've just clicked into a specific discussion item. I can see that people are having a discussion around the G10 model. So I'm going to respond to Chirag's post here. And I'm going to say, at Chirag, what you'll see at the bottom is that people I'm following has come up, Chirag and also everyone, and we should Chirag, and he's the web marketing manager. So I can click on that. That's my mention, and Chirag will see that in his newsfeed, on the newsfeed app, on his My Site. Please can we have it in red, hash customer services. Perhaps we've done some research that says a G10 model in red will improve our customer services. And we can use hashtags, and it's going to bring that up as well. Of course, search is going to be capturing all of this and crawling through all of this, so next time someone clicks on the hashtag CSAT, they're going to be able to see this discussion. So again, really powerful, really integrated. What's nice, I think, Ian, I mean, you've talked to lots of customers about social intent. What's nice about 13 is that none of this information is wasted. It's not just ephemera that's only shared with 2 or 3 of your colleagues that you sit next to anymore. It can be used right across the organisation as proper business information.
And it's much more readily shared and available. It's not just sitting in somebody's inbox.
No, exactly. So
it's a huge cultural change, of course, to get people to start using these kind of tools, perhaps instead of using email. But if you can manage that and do that effectively, then the upside is pretty significant.
Yeah, and I think there's been lots and lots of companies that have been creating sort of discussion type items or sort of newsfeed type things that you can put on project sites that perhaps you can do out of the box now, which I think is fantastic.
And you don't have to go full hog with this as well, of course. I mean, just to enable a site newsfeed on a project site or a customer site or something like that can just be such a huge win. And people then you're starting to use social tools, perhaps without even knowing that they're really using social type functionality.
Absolutely. Thanks,
okay.
Ian.
So the next area that we're going to talk about is web content management. So the ability to use SharePoint to create and manage really engaging, really smart-looking websites, be that an internal intranet site or a public-facing website. SharePoint 2010 certainly could do that, and it took a great leap forwards from SharePoint 2007. However, it's another big investment area, and the changes when we go to 2013 are really quite significant, and it actually becomes a lot easier to start building sites that don't really look so much like SharePoint anymore, which is quite a common requirement. So I'll move on now to the table, the comparison table, and we can take a look. So one of the immediate things to point out here is that the tool set, the actual things that we use to change the way SharePoint looks and feels, has changed dramatically from 10 to 13. In 2010, your options really were either to use, if you wanted to brand SharePoint extensively, your options really were either to use SharePoint Designer or to use Visual Studio and to actually get a developer involved. SharePoint 2013 has taken a very different approach, and actually you can use any tool that you want. So if you've got web designers who are happy working with Dreamweaver, then you can use Dreamweaver. If you're a real hardcore techie and you want to use Notepad, you can use Notepad should you so desire.
Yeah.
And what you do is you upload your page designs into SharePoint 2013 via a new piece of functionality called Design Manager, and that enables you to actually kind of add the SharePoint functionality into your designed and branded site. It's really very nice. So that's the way to go about comprehensive branding and changing of the UI in SharePoint 2013. If you want to do some light branding, which I think Simon will show in a minute, you've got some options there as well. So in 2010 you could do some basic light branding, changing colors and images and changing fonts perhaps through themes, which was reasonable, but it was quite limited. Themes have gone, but they've been replaced with an improved mechanism that Simon's going to show shortly. Then we've got some great other changes as well. Some of the key wins that I see coming up time and time again are support for HTML5, which makes SharePoint much more cross-device and cross-browser compatible. Friendly URLs as well. This was a really huge thing. So for anyone who's worked with SharePoint 2010 sites, it can be quite frustrating when all of your sites have got things like pages in the URL names. If you open a document, sometimes it's in a subfolder, you can end up with really quite long and quite clunky URLs. That's been massively improved in 2013. I've already mentioned device channels, the ability to target different content to different channels. We've got some very nice web parts for doing things like or showing a display of content, kind of rolling up content, if you like, in a new web part called the Content by Search web part, which is a really very powerful web part. So say, for example, you had multiple project sites and you wanted to show all of the project status reports from all of your projects, then Content by Search web part is a great way to deal with that.
And that's cross-site collection?
Correct.
Because it's using search?
Correct. So that can work.
Where's that been all our lives?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a gap that traditionally you'd have to go out and buy a third-party tool or custom code to get a solution for. We've got some really nice video handling as well. That's been significantly improved, and Simon obviously showed that earlier. One of the things that's really quite clever as well is catalogs. So you can define a list as a catalog, and if you want to then start perhaps on the public-facing website where you've got products, and you want to be able to allow people to search for your products by different pieces of metadata, and actually kind of have search-driven navigation within that as well. There's some really nice functionality for doing that as well.
A bit like the sort of thing you see in, John Lewis website, not to name any particular brand, but there are lots of very similar sites.
Show me all the cameras which are SLR, which can take more than 500 pictures and are red. Yeah, absolutely. So catalogs and search-driven navigation, those tie really nicely together. Completely new functionality, very comprehensive if you want to do that kind of catalog-based capability. We've got some improvements in the way that we handle and resize images, which is great when you're designing web pages, and perhaps you want to put small images and medium images and large images onto different parts of a page. Support for multi-languages is improved again from the kind of variations functionality that we had in 2010, and we've already mentioned the analytics improvements with that now being search-driven. So I'm going to hand over to Simon. I think before I do that, though, it's worth mentioning in terms of the branding. Simon, I believe, is going to show the lights branding, but the more comprehensive design branding around using Design Manager, there is actually a series of articles on the Point Beyond blog, which shows how that tool set is used and how that works. So I would direct anyone who's interested in that to take a look at our blog, where one of our consultants published a very nice series of articles.
Yeah.
So with that ado, I shall hand over to Simon, who's going to talk through web content management.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'd like to say that that series of blog posts wasn't by me. a bit jealous. It's a very good series of blog. I think it's 4 articles taking you step by step through everything. So
it's another area where you could do a whole a whole webinar on just on that really.
Absolutely. Okay, so some of you may have remembered this from when we did the mobile bit. It's a very, well, kind of unengaging site, a standard SharePoint team site. I'll let my mind run right here where I've created an activity center, the sort of thing that you go on stag do's, perhaps. And what we're going to do is try and make this a little bit more, you know, kind of muddy and shooty and quad bikey. So
it looks a bit SharePointy at the moment.
It looks a bit SharePoint. Let's lose it. Okay, so if I click into site settings, first thing you'll notice under look and feel is there are a lot more options. And some of the ones that you'll recognize from what Ian was just talking to you about, design manager, device channels and that kind of stuff. What I'm going to do is just look at a really simple change the look. This is a little bit akin to themes that we saw in SharePoint 2010, but I want to show you that it's quicker and more flexible perhaps than you have.
Themes on steroids.
It is, yeah. All right, so these are some of my themes. I'm going to select orange. Don't know why. Perhaps I think orange is manly. Who knows? Let's not question it. And let's change some of the colours around. Now, this might be difficult for those of you on a slower connection, but let me just click through and change some of the colours. Change the site layout. And what I'm going to show is a little bit of drag and drop as well. So let me just line up my...
So everyone catch up.
Yeah, just watching our little audience view bar just to check that everyone's there. So I've also got some images here in just a standard SharePoint image library, and you can see even this is on steroids. Got some really nice functionality here, but I just want to find an image that's going to scream Outdoor Activity Centre. I think I've spotted it. It's got to be this abstract background with a huge tyre track. So let me just click into that. So we've got our image. All I'm going to do is click and drag over to the left-hand side to add the image as the background on my site. Can you believe it?
The demo gods
drowning. Demo gremlins.
Try again. Yay!
There we go. Right, okay. I think I may have dragged a little too slow. Okay, so you can see I just clicked and dragged from right to left. Bingo, there's our image. So let's try it out. And while that's whirling away, I'm going to click around here. I want to show you what image renditions are while that's sorting itself out. So this is a view of our standard SharePoint image library. And if I go to the contextual menu on this image, I've got an option here to edit renditions. So let me click into edit renditions. And what we'll see is that SharePoint on the fly takes my image and it gives me some options. Start off at 10. See some nice options there. It's also giving me like a thumbnail, a banner. So let me get back to our site. Let's have a look. So it gives me a preview, which is nice. I click Let's Do It, and it's taking me to the site settings again. I'm rushing a little here because I know we're short of time. So what I want to do is I want to give us a new logo top left. So what I'm going to do is just drag my URL to this rendition image across to that insert logo box. And you can see it's just dropped the URL straight into my insert logo. Click OK. Click on my site. There's the logo.
Look at that.
There's my site. It's looking a bit better.
Looking good.
Perhaps my resolution isn't helping. There we go. Branding in 5 minutes. So as you can see, for things like team sites, project sites, perhaps stuff in your organization that you want to just sort of make look a little bit corporate, very quick and easy to do. Drag and drop, image renditions, lots of really powerful features that you've probably seen in other web content management systems. Finally, they're here in SharePoint.
Yeah, I think SharePoint 2013 has really grown up as an enterprise-class web content management system.
Absolutely. Right, let me hand you back to Ian, conscious of the time.
Thank you very much, Simon. So the last kind of area that we want to talk about really is solutions. And what do we mean by this? We mean using SharePoint as a platform for building business solutions. So, for example, forms and workflows and data storage and lists and interconnectivity with other line of business applications. If we look at SharePoint 2010, the options were somewhat limited. Everything was very text-based when it comes to doing things like creating workflows. SharePoint 2013, see significant improvements in that. If we go ahead to our comparison slide now and take a look at that, we can see some of the significant changes. Now, workflow is worth mentioning first of all. The workflow changes are quite significant in that SharePoint is now being, the workflow engine in SharePoint is now being replaced with a whole new workflow engine, which is called Workflow Manager, which actually has to run on a separate server to SharePoint 2013. SharePoint 2010 workflow is still available, but the new Workflow Manager service is also available should you be using SharePoint 2013 now. And it's a much more capable platform, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. There have been some improvements, things like InfoPath Form Services is now much more compliant, which means it works much better on mobile devices. We've got support for digital signatures at last in InfoPath. The one thing that's being deprecated is the coding environment in InfoPath is no longer. You now need Visual Studio if you want to write code in InfoPath. And Access Services, the product that allows you to take an Access database and publish it up to SharePoint, has seen some significant changes. And I think it's certainly a technology to watch. One of the big changes with Access Services, when you take an Access database now and publish it to SharePoint, instead of unpacking your Access tables into SharePoint lists, it now unpacks it into SQL Server tables. So it gives you a much more scalable, much more kind of open and accessible platform for your applications. So Access Services is definitely an area to watch. I'm conscious of time. I'll hand back to Simon now. We'll just give a quick demo of some of the solutions capability in 13.
Brilliant. I don't want to ask how long I've got. Probably minutes.
Yeah, right. I've got a few minutes.
All right, good stuff. Okay, so yes, if you're thinking about solutions, it's really got to be forms and workflow. So this is an InfoPath form that I've set up earlier on, and you can see it's fairly standard. We're carrying on my theme of stag do style site, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to our existing SharePoint site. So let me drag this across. Now this hasn't changed in 2010, but there are some improvements in InfoPath. Just have to make a little quick change there. Fantastic. Okay. Now your screens may have trouble catching up with this, but allow me just to click through quickly and drop a InfoPath web part on the home page. Nothing new here. You'll have seen this in 2010. Rattle through this so that you can see. Stuff. So this is new changes in InfoPath, things like one-click publishing, which I've been using a lot while setting up this demo, and actually it saves you a lot of time. I thought when I was reading about it when the SharePoint first came out, 13 came out.
Yeah, well, that's great. Actually, it's really useful.
Yeah, proves me wrong, hey? Cynical Simon. Okay. So I've added the InfoPath form to the page. You can see it's rendering exactly the same, and it's worth saying again that this renders in the browser and it's AA compliant. Second thing to add is workflow, of course, the second part of any solution. So let's have a look at workflow in SharePoint Designer. So this is the site open in SharePoint Designer, and I'm in the workflow for new booking, which is the workflow that sits behind that booking form. So let me edit that workflow. And what you'll recognize, and probably groan some of you, is a text-based editor for the workflow, which we're kind of all familiar with and not necessarily comfortable with. If I click over to Views here, we'll get to the Visual Designer, and it starts to become a much prettier place to work. And it's much clearer, actually, what's happening in your workflow. So you can see I've got a workflow here for the form, and if someone selects shooting, what's going to happen is someone's going to have to collect an indemnity, fill out an indemnity form as part of their booking. A lot to show in a very short time. So, and
there's some really nice functionality in there around additional things that you can do now with 13, like having loops, which you couldn't even do in 2010.
Loads of new functions. So let's just complete this form very quickly. Put in my address. 3.on. Expect lots of spam emails from everyone later on. There's my stag do. I'll type Here, let's choose clay pigeon shooting. See, I've done a little bit of maths on this form. It's going to total it up for me. That looks good to me. Pretty lean stag do, isn't it? One lot of clay pigeon shooting. Click submit. It's going to send the data away. What's going to happen is that workflow is going to kick off. So if I look at my current bookings, I should see a new form has been added. And you can see that the status is new booking. This workflow's kicked off. And another new thing is that this stage here, health and safety check, so the different boxes you can drag on, a bit like Visio when you put backgrounds around different related activities. This actually translates into the workflow. F5, and click into the back end here. We can see that shooting's being selected, and the indemnity form's being created, so it's actually spinning up a SharePoint document, a Word document in a SharePoint library from a content type. Really powerful stuff. It didn't take you very long to set this up at all. Yeah, it's really slick.
That would have been a real difficult challenge to do in 2010.
It would have been. If I click over to Outlook, what we should have seen is I've received an email with the details of my booking. There it is. Yeah. And a link to the indemnity form to say you need to fill out this disclaimer form before your booking can proceed. So it's a very simple demonstration, but forms and workflow, I think you could actually build some pretty engaging business solutions now using SharePoint 13 out of the box, which I think is fantastic news. Great. Let me hand you back to Ian.
Thank you very much, Simon.
You're welcome.
Just a few little pieces to round off the session, really, that we need to touch on quickly. The first one is the App Store. So this is a new piece of functionality for SharePoint 2013. The idea is that third-party providers are able to write apps and publish them to a Microsoft public-hosted App Store so that people with SharePoint can add them to their SharePoint Online instance. I said SharePoint Online because if an app's running in the public App Store, most people will be adding that to SharePoint Online. It is possible to add them to on-premise, but it's quite challenging. Alternatively, if you're running on-premise, you can use a similar model and you can actually have your own internal apps available on your own internal app store, which is quite nice. Moving on from that, there's a few other things that I feel we should just say we didn't mention, but they are also quite significant areas in SharePoint 2013. The first one is there's been a huge investment in doing e-discovery and legal holds, so the ability to find documents and hold them, so stopping retention policies from being applied. There have been numerous improvements in records and document management, not least around document life cycles and retention policies. There have been several improvements in business connectivity services, so the services that you use to put SharePoint into your other line of business applications. In particular, there's things like support for OData now, which is becoming a widely used standard. And also there are significant improvements with multi-tenancy, so the ability to have multiple kind of separate virtual instances of SharePoint running for different tenants. One of the good things that's worth mentioning there very quickly is the ability to have a fully featured search admin page for every single tenant, which is really very powerful. A few tech things to round up, and I won't spend very long on this. There have been quite a lot of back-end improvements to SharePoint, so the performance has been improved, numerous tweaks to that. The architecture has been streamlined, SQL and performance has been improved. One thing that's worth mentioning is shredded storage. So those of you who've worked with 10 or earlier versions will remember that every time you save a new version of a document, it would save a whole new copy of the document. So you have like a 10 meg PowerPoint and you change one, you put a full stop at the end of one of your sentences and save it, and that's a new version, and another 10 megs of your database used up. SharePoint 2013 has got a new technology called shredded storage, so effectively only the differences are stored, so the shred is stored, in fact, so dramatically reduces the storage requirements and storage costs for versions of documents. There's also a minimal download strategy, which means that pages load more quickly, and actually bandwidth requirements have been reduced up to about 40% less according to Microsoft bandwidth requirements for SharePoint 2013. So if you're running SharePoint across widely distributed sites and your bandwidth is limited, that could be quite significant. We've certainly several customers in that situation. Other thing worth mentioning very quickly is customizations. There's a new app module for building customizations, which means your customizations now you have the option to not deploy them to SharePoint, the preferred approach now is to have them running on separate servers and talking to SharePoint through an API, and that's quite a significant change. Again, it's something we could do a whole webinar on.
Yeah.
But just want to make people aware of that. And the last thing is the change to claims authentication from classic mode authentication that we have currently. Again, I won't talk about that in detail now, but it's a significant change. But if you're running classic mode, which most people will be on 10, 13 is now the default, and in order to enable all of the functionality in 2013, you have to be running claims. So it's worth planning as part of a migration strategy to look at how to move to claims authentication. So, in summary, a lot of changes to 2013. I think it's worth thinking about perhaps if you've got customizations, can perhaps some of the out-of-the-box functionality in SharePoint 2013 replace custom development of third-party tools that may have been used in the past? SharePoint 2013 has really taken a big step forward as a business solution platform, and I think as well, if people have perhaps held off upgrading from 27 to 2010, it may be worth revisiting that now, because there's not really much point in going to 2010 now.
No, and I think a lot of people might have held off going from 7 to 10 just because they had a lot of customizations, and now you're looking at 13 and thinking, could a lot of these be done out of the box? Yeah, if I do it out of the box, is that going to make my support nightmare easier?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, people people may be wary of 2013 thinking that it's still a new product, but in fact it's a pretty mature, it's a pretty stable product. It's kind of the fourth version of SharePoint, and there's no reason to move from 7 to 10 now. It makes a lot more sense to move straight from 7 to 13.
Yep.
Finally, quickly going to mention what's next. Point Beyond do offer an upgrade readiness assessment, because we found a lot of people are asking us the same questions about SharePoint 2013. Does it make sense for me to upgrade to SharePoint 2013? How should I go about upgrading SharePoint 2013? And if I was to upgrade, what would it cost? And we've really created this packaged upgrade readiness assessment that seeks to answer those three questions by helping you to define a business case to see whether it's worth upgrading SharePoint 2013, come up with an action plan that will define the steps for achieving a migration, and also come up with an approximate cost to migrate. So if that's of interest to anyone attending this today, we're very happy to speak about that further. That really concludes for now. I think we're going to move on to some questions, so we're just about in time. Both Simon and myself would like to thank everyone very much for attending this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you all very much. So let's have a look at some questions. How do I scroll up? There we go. Oh, we've got quite a few. Good. Okay. How do we move this better?
Just make that one.
Oh, do you want to drive in?
So just bear with me while I arrange the windows.
Oh, that's better.
Okay, so we've got the first question is, can you tell me a little bit about the new hardware requirements for SharePoint 2013?
Okay.
Do you want to go?
Well, I think we mentioned some earlier already. So Workflow Manager needs to run on a separate box. It's very similar to, well, it's an app, isn't it? It's an application server, and
yeah.
SharePoint has gone this way of sort of breaking out servers into different roles. So Workflow Manager and also Office Web Apps running on separate servers.
The Office Web Applications, that's a very interesting one to mention actually. If you want to have the search previews that Simon demonstrated, you will need to be running Office Web Applications, Office Web Apps server,
yeah.
And that has to run on a separate box to your SharePoint farm.
Absolutely. So there's some implications there in your sort of architectural planning as part of a migration. Do we want these nice features? Right, well that means we need X number of servers. And of course, if you want to load balance that for resilience, then you're going to need two Office Web App servers.
Sure. I think the other thing to mention there as well is perhaps the hardware requirements have ratcheted up as well. Chances are you're going to need more servers with higher memory, higher processor power.
Although interestingly, I think SQL 12, I don't think the hardware requirements are much higher for the basic running. I mean, I'm not talking crunching cubes and things, but
a lot depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's like with search as well. A lot search can massively impact the hardware requirements depending on how much content you want to index and how you want to go about indexing that.
Absolutely.
The next question is, are there any changes in the integration capabilities with the enterprise EDRMS, such as autonomy and Meridio, etc.? I believe not out of the box,
No.
unless there have been some of the improvements in BCS that would contribute to that. But I'm not aware of any new connectors or anything like that.
No. But I mean, yeah, autonomy is hooked into SharePoint rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So, I mean, I know all of the ISVs are frantically making sure their product is 13 ready.
Well,
most are. But
yeah.
perhaps we could pick that one up
Yeah, I think we
offline.
can pick that one up
Yeah.
offline, David.
Okay. Any other questions? Can you slow down on the demo? Yeah, that was a little early. Sorry, I was clicking through a bit fast, so I've hopefully slowed down for some of you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, conscious of the time.
Absolutely. Unless you have any more questions, I think we will say to everyone, thank you very much for your time. We hope you've found this session useful. It has been a very high-speed tour.
Yep.
If anyone would like any more information or to discuss some requirements in more detail, please feel free to give us a shout. Will the slides be shared? We'll certainly be sharing the a video of the deck of the session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, very useful. Oh, thanks very much.
Good. I'm glad you've enjoyed, everyone, and thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
See you next time.